For decades, U.S. wheat was the industry benchmark, trusted from Chicago to Seoul. But by 2025, that dominance hit a hard stall. Nations like the Philippines, France, South Korea, and Mexico turned to Canada, Australia, and Argentina for steadier, smarter supply. Why the sudden switch? It's not just about price per ton. It's about predictability, politics, and tech-driven trust. From carbon compliance to logistical risk, the U.S. lost traction. Let's explore how the crown slipped. Slipping gears, how U.S. wheat lost its edge. Once the gold standard of global grain, American wheat is now grinding against resistance. Hard red winter wheat from Kansas and spring wheat out of North Dakota were once industry legends trusted by bakers and buyers from Manila to Marseille. But starting in 2024, something cracked. By mid-2025, long-term contracts were being rerouted north or offshore. It wasn't the price. Kansas wheat only dipped about $8 to $10 per ton. The deeper issue, trust U.S. shipments, became synonymous with delays, bureaucratic fog, and regulatory volatility. Take the Philippines. San Miguel Foods, a heavyweight in the milling scene, walked away from a 110,000-ton renewal deal with U.S. firms. Instead, they inked contracts with Canada's Viterra and Australia's CBH. Why? Because shippers started seeing U.S. ports as risk zones. Canada and Australia offered something America couldn't: stability in Europe. France saw its lowest U.S. wheat imports in 2 decades. The problem? American wheat didn't play nice with the EU's digital carbon traceability system. While Canada had QR-coded carbon data embedded in every batch, the U.S. was still stuck in paperwork purgatory under the EU's Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. CBAM, that's a delay and a deal-breaker. So while U.S. wheat still has the horsepower in terms of protein and bake quality, its tech stack and compliance game just aren't race-ready. But grain chemistry soon proved to be just as important as grain logistics. Fueling doubts when chemicals stall global demand. In today's market, it's not just what's in your grain, it's what's not. Enter glyphosate, the weed-killing chemical that's become the Achilles heel of American exports. In 2025, South Korea dropped a regulatory bombshell, a new glyphosate residue cap of 30 parts per billion, aligning with strict EU standards. The problem: U.S. wheat couldn't clear that bar hard. Red winter varieties were testing between 200 and 400 ppb, triggering retests on nearly a third of shipments and jamming port operations. Canada, meanwhile, saw this coming. There are 2023 Clean Farm Transition-funded residue reduction across prairie farms, Saskatchewan. Even field-tested air-guided drones for targeted glyphosate application, trimming chemical exposure by a staggering 90%. The results were immediate. Canadian wheat captured 62% of Korea's imports by mid-2025. For the U.S., that meant a $410 million revenue hit and 6,200 jobs lost in North Dakota alone, according to the Parallel Economics Institute. In this new global track, food safety isn't just a checklist, it's a market advantage. And right now, Canada's running laps around America. Before we dive into how logistics tip the scales even further, hit that like button and subscribe. Whether you're here for policy curves or powertrain talk, we've got your back on every turn. Border bottlenecks and the high cost of uncertainty. While Asia and Europe cite residue and regulation, Mexico's shift was fueled by something every driver dreads. Traffic. In 2025, new U.S. border protocols turned every shipment into a customs nightmare, with X-ray scans, long queues, and red tape piling up at ports like Laredo and Mesa. Mexican buyers simply couldn't keep up their daily grind. Then came Canada's masterstroke, a new through-rail fast-lane protocol that moved wheat from Vancouver to Baja without ever stopping for a border check. That wasn't just efficiency, it was strategic domination. Canada's share of Mexican wheat imports jumped from 32% to 38%, while the U.S. share plummeted to 17%. Back in Kansas, the fallout was immediate. Silo stocks surged 44% and spot prices dipped below break-even. Purdue economists warned that once a buyer exits a U.S. grain chain, the odds of return are just 15% over 5 years. That's not a market dip, it's a structural loss. But even as the U.S. stumbled, Canada wasn't just filling the void, they were rewriting the playbook. From canola crisis to wheat powerhouse, Canada's bold U-turn. Canada's wheat rise wasn't just America's stumble, it was a full-throttle pivot from panic to performance. When China slapped a 100% tariff on Canadian canola meal and the U.S. added duties on canola oil, prairie farmers were staring down a disaster. But instead of idling in frustration, they downshifted and accelerated into wheat. Ottawa didn't leave them stranded through the 950 million Canadian dollar protein supercluster program. Policymakers funded digital infrastructure, traceability tools, and new high-performance wheat varieties. Fields, once ruled by canola, were suddenly pumping out 90 to 100 bushel per acre spring wheat. One farmer near Winnipeg called it a rebirth of the prairie belt, and buyers took notice. By 2025, Canada's wheat wasn't just filling ships, it was setting standards. Over 50 nations were tapping into real-time protein, moisture, and residue data, all accessible via QR code. This wasn't just grain, it was a tech-enabled supply chain. Even Australia's CBH Group adopted the model. Meanwhile, U.S. exporters were still fumbling with emailed PDFs and patchy state protocols. The final seal of approval came in July 2025. Beijing greenlit the $34 billion Bunge-Viterra merger, giving Canadian grain a powerful foothold in Asia and Europe, once laughed off as poverty grass. Canadian spring wheat is now leading a digital agricultural revolution with tech trust and talk to match. So with Canada surging ahead, how did Washington respond? Washington's countermove, a last chance fix or too little too late, with its global position slipping. Washington hit the ignition on a long overdue response in March 2025. The USDA rolled out the Strategic Grain Reliability Act, a legislative jumpstart aimed at restoring America's wheat reputation. It sounds promising. IoT sensors linking silos to federal labs, digital export certificates to ditch outdated paperwork, and geopolitical risk guarantees to calm jittery buyers. But here's the catch. It's all still stuck in the legislative slow-lane budget fights. Partisan gridlock and a distracted capital are stalling rollout. Meanwhile, U.S. wheat futures continue their roller coaster ride, even with June's 12-year high in preseason export volumes. America's global wheat share has withered to 10.5%, its third lowest in decades. We're shipping more, but with less weight behind each deal, hoping to recapture ground. The USDA is eyeing new markets like India and Nigeria, but India's price protections and Nigeria's infrastructure headaches aren't exactly low-hanging fruit. While America plans, Canada delivers and keeps landing the contracts that used to be ours. Which brings us to the final question. Final lap: can America reclaim its grain glory? This isn't just about fields and harvests, it's about whether U.S. agriculture can shift gears fast. Because while America has been coasting on legacy, Canada built a modern, data-driven machine that buyers now trust. If the Strategic Grain Reliability Act stays stalled, the U.S. might not just lose market share, it could lose relevance. So now we turn to you. Can American wheat rebuild global confidence, or has trust been lost for good? Is Canada's dominance the new norm, or a product of perfect timing and trade chaos? Should the U.S. double down on ag-tech innovation instead of retaliatory tariffs? Sound off in the comments. We want your thoughts. Like the video, subscribe, and make sure you've got notifications on so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching and see you next time. You can now check out any of the videos on the screen. There's plenty more to explore.